Let's take a look at the highlights of Day 2 of Blitz portion of Superbet chess tournament in Poland. And we start with Indian Super GM Pragnananda versus Romanian Grandmaster Bogdan Daniel Diak. This is the bishop and pawn endgame in which Pragnananda has his pawn on c7 ready to be promoted to a queen on a square c8. Therefore, black takes the pawn on c7, sacrifices the bishop, king takes c7, and activates the king on f4, attacking the bishop on e4. Pragnananda moves the bishop away to d5, and after g3, Bogdan Diak has two passing pawns on f3 and g3. The engine evaluated this position as a draw. But Pragnananda makes a mistake. He plays c6 and allows black to play g2. And now he cannot stop black from promoting a pawn to a square g1. Pragnananda continues with king d6. We have a queen on the board on g1, c7, now ready to promote to a square c8, but Bogdan checks Pragnananda from b6, queen b6 check, king d7, queen d5, attacking the bishop on d5. And if now Pragnananda promotes the pawn to a queen, then queen takes d5 with the check, and black would win the game. Therefore, in this position, Pragnananda plays king d6, protecting the bishop, another check from e5, another check from c3, king goes to d7, and f2, and now another pawn is gonna get promoted to a queen. Bishop g2, protecting the square from promotion, but here we have check on d4, king goes to e7, another check on g7, and Bogdan grabs the bishop on g2, but allows Pragnananda to promote the pawn to c8, queen c8, and now we have three queens on the board with Pragnananda promoting, Bogdan promoting his pawn to a queen. So two queens against a queen. Queen c3, queen d1 check, and after queen c2, the exchange of the queens is inevitable, and Pragnananda resigned. The next game I want to show you is between Vladimir Fedoseev, who had an absolutely incredible tournament, and he is playing against French legendary player Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. White is without an exchange. They have a bishop and a rook against two rooks, two pawns against two pawns. But the position is overall even, because white has a very strong bishop on d4, pawn on c5 is very dangerous passing pawn, and the rook on the 7th rank cuts off the black king. So in this position, rook a6 check from MVL, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, that's a mistake, because after rook d6 and rook a4 attacking the bishop, c6, the pawn is just moving forward. Rook g6 check, and now bishop f6. And what happened in this position, then from an absolutely even position, or even black was a little bit better, in about 2-3 moves, we have a winning position for Fedoseev. The problem for black is that they cannot find an escape from a checkmate. The checkmate threat is rook d8 check and rook h8 checkmate. Vachier-Lagrave plays king h7, but this doesn't help because rook d7 check. Vachier-Lagrave resigned because after king g8, he is going to get checkmated with the same idea, rook d8 check, rook h8 checkmate. The next game we're going to show you, Jan Krzysztof Duda, Polish Grandmaster, is playing against Alireza Firouzja, French, very strong favorite of this tournament, who didn't have a great tournament, but always a very good player and very dangerous player, especially in Blitz. Krzysztof Duda is playing white. His bishop is under attack. If he moved the bishop to c1 and it's protected there by the queen, then he just wins this game because he has an extra material. But instead, he plays a more aggressive move, knight g5. And he wants to checkmate the black king with queen h7, queen f7. And that was a critical mistake. because he missed the move from Alireza Firouzja, queen h5, forcing the exchange of the queens. Queen takes h5, pawn takes h5. Now the bishop under attack goes to b2. We have d2. The passing pawn is ready to be promoted to a queen. So bishop f3 stops it for a second. But after rook c1, white has no choice that to play king g2 and queen d1. Exchange, bishop f6, and in this position, white resigned because they're playing without a rook. Next game I want to show you is between David Gavrilescu, Romanian Grandmaster, and Levon Aronian, Armenian Grandmaster representing USA. Gavrilescu's position is absolutely winning. He has 2 extra pawns in an endgame that has 2 rooks against 2 rooks, bishop against bishop, and 5 pawns against 3 pawns. But Gavrilescu blunders with bishop c3 and allows Aronian to take the pawn on f4 using the pin. c5, another mistake by Gavrilescu, and Aronian immediately takes advantage, moving his rook to c4, double attacking the bishop and the pawn. Gavrilescu plays bishop b4 that makes sense to defend both the bishop and the pawn, but after rook c2, we can see what a monster that light square bishop on c6 is. And after rook c1, rook g2, white simply resigns, because after this check, the king can go either to f1 and get checkmated by a rook from f8, or it can go to h1 and get checkmated in 2 moves. First, check by the bishop, and the only move rook e4, and bishop takes e4, checkmate. Next game I want to show you is Maxime Vachier-Lagrave from France and Indian Super GM Prag. This position is totally winning for white. But believe it or not, in this endgame, queen and 3 pawns against queen and 2 pawns, most importantly, the pawn on b7 is 1 square away from promotion. But believe it or not, this position is won by white only with 1 move. Only 1 move wins this position, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave finds that move, and that move is g6. g6, f take g6, queen d7, with the idea to play queen c8 check and win the game. Black plays h2. They also want to promote the pawn to a queen. Queen c8 check. King h7. So now queen takes b8 without a check, and that allows Pragnananda to promote his pawn to a queen also. But this position is still winning for Maxime. Queen c7 check, another check from f4, and second queen is on the board. Check from d1, but it doesn't help because king c3. White would escape the checks and would win the game with an extra queen, and Pragnananda resigned. Let's take a look in this position where we started. Why the move queen d7 doesn't win the game? Why did the white have to play g6 first? And the reason being that if queen d7 now, then black have wonderful defense, king g7. And now if queen c8, this move comes without a check, which is very important. And the queen escapes to d6, starts checking white king, and white cannot escape checks. And this would be a draw game. Now, after white played g6 in this position, and after f takes g6, now the king cannot escape to the 7th rank. So after queen d7, black do not have the move king g7. And that was the whole difference. Subtle move g6 decided this game. Next game I want to show you missed tactics by black. Bogdan Daniel Diak, Romanian Grandmaster, playing with black, Levon Aronian is playing with white, and here black to move, and they had a nice tactics to have an advantage. They had to play rook f1 check. First of all, white took the pawn on c6, and in this position they had to play rook f1 check. King c2 is the only move. Then we have a fork. King c3, knight takes the rook on c6, and most probably Daniel saw this position, but he figured that after bishop takes c6, the bishop takes the knight with the check. And that probably when he finished the calculation. Because this position looks like it's winning for white, because next move they will take the knight. But it's not so easy. King goes to a7. King indeed takes the knight on c4, but black have a wonderful move, king b6, attacking the bishop. And now when the bishop goes away, there was rook c1, skewer, check, and black takes the knight on c5. And this position is much better for black because they have a rook against the bishop. Instead, in this position, after a rook takes c6, black blundered with the move knight d3. And white won this game. So, the last highlight I want to show you, this could have been the best game of this tournament. If Polish Grandmaster Jan Krzysztof Duda found a beautiful checkmate. He's playing against Aravind Chidambaram, Indian Grandmaster, who in this position takes the pawn on b2. And his reasoning for this move is that if queen takes b2, then queen takes c4. Black takes the rook and easily win. But here, Jan Krzysztof Duda had a wonderful checkmate, which is called, by the way, Anastasia checkmate. He had to start with the move knight e7 check. The only move is king h8, and now sacrifice the queen on h7 with the brilliant sacrifice. King takes h7, rook h4. And the squares g8 and g6 are protected by the knight. One more move can happen here is queen h5, and after rook takes h5, this would have been an Anastasia checkmate. Absolutely beautiful. It didn't happen. Jan Krzysztof Duda still won this game, actually in pretty interesting fashion as well. He trapped black queen. So after rook a7, he attacked the queen, and the queen really didn't have any moves except for queen c8, but on that he would just lose it after knight e7 check and winning the queen. The tournament belonged to Vladimir Fedoseev from Slovenia. He was incredible and took the first place. Second place, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave from France. Third place, Ramesh Babu Pragnananda from India.